Richplanet TV is sponsored by shopholistic.co.uk, bringing you quality detox and natural health products at affordable prices.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Today we are going to be talking about haunted skies, which is the encyclopedia of British UFOs. Now, this is the first of a groundbreaking new series compiled by former police officer John Hanson and his partner Dawn Holloway, together with David Sankey, a veteran UFO researcher and artist. The multi-part series covers British UFO sightings from 1940 to the present day. And Haunted Skies, as it says on the back cover, is the most ambitious series of books ever attempted in the history of ufology, and will no doubt provide a new benchmark in the quality of such publications. Welcome, John Hanson.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a glowing tribute, and it's very nice of you, first of all, to invite me to be able to have the opportunity to talk about how these books were actually made.
Okay, now I mentioned that you were a police officer, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But
Right.
First off, this is a volume of encyclopedias covering in chronological order, and that's very important, do you think, the fact that you've...
Absolutely, because the fact that it's produced on a day-by-day basis obviously offers far more evidence as to the behaviour of these objects than just maybe single random cases. One of the objectives by myself and Dawn all those years ago was to obtain all of these sightings and then catalogue them and then put them into date order, because that's really how it should be.
And you've published 5 volumes ranging from 1940 up to... What date are you up to?
Well, the current book we're working on is volume 6, which covers 75, 76 and 77, and we've referred to that as the Jubilee book, and it certainly is dedicated to the Queen in the Jubilee year, and hopefully that
Right.
she may get a copy in due course.
Okay, all right. Well, you
I don't know
might
what
know that you might know that I'm not a monarchist if you watch
No,
my
no,
show,
I
but that's fair
understand
enough.
that, yeah. It is a Jubilee year, Richard.
Right, okay. Now, so you're only up to 1977, published from 1940, so you've still got a long way to go.
That is the most frightening, ridiculous thing about all of this, is that it's taken us all of these years to put it together. And when we first started, we naively thought that we would produce 4 books to cover from 1940 to the 1999 or the year 2000. We thought we would actually naively need 4 books, but we'll probably need at least 8 to 10 books, because our attitude is, let's do it properly. Let's get as much information in as we can, because that's what it's all about.
Yep,
we're
absolutely.
very passionate about this work.
Now then, John, you served as a police officer and as a CID detective.
Yeah,
Just tell us about your history in the police force.
I did 27 years in the West Midlands Police, some of it obviously with the Birmingham City Police, and I think 15 of those years approximately were in the CID as a detective, and I left in 1994.
So you're not someone who's liable to believe flights of fancy, etc.
Well, all I'll say is that if I'd been a young constable walking the streets of Birmingham, as indeed I was in the 60s, if somebody had come up to me and said they'd seen a UFO or a flying saucer, I would have thought they're absolutely crackpots.
Right.
I never thought in my wildest dreams that these things existed. And if one bears in mind that during October 67, there was a prolific wave of sightings of what became labelled as the Flying Cross. Now, I knew none of this, but with all due respects as a young police officer, I suppose getting involved in strange phenomena was the last on my
Right. Okay.
interests.
Now, you retired in 1995, is that right?
Approximately, yeah. I
Right.
think it was 1994.
Right, and up until that point, you had no interest in it.
None at all.
You didn't think there was anything,
Well, why should
any
I?
reality to
Well,
UFOs.
that's right, because of course UFOs don't exist. This is a sterile world where UFOs don't exist, or at least I thought that that was the case until, as I discussed with you earlier, a matter that was brought to my attention of my son, who was a police constable, and this is the first time I've ever mentioned to anybody that the so-called police colleague, as I've referred to him in previous reports, was in fact my son.
Right.
And I say you've seen a photograph of my son there. Yeah.
Okay, so your son comes to you at that time, and what does he say?
My son phoned up and he said, "Dad, I've just seen a UFO." He was with a policewoman. It was in Birmingham, and you can imagine my words to him, because I thought he was pulling my leg.
Right.
And it was only the next morning that I discussed it with him that I realised he'd seen something highly unusual, and that's how my particular investigation into that matter started.
Right. All right, so tell me about that case then, John. You were obviously highly sceptical at that point.
I was, until I contacted a couple called Rob and Marilyn Aldworth from the Birmingham UFO Society, who had in fact managed to obtain a copy of the PNC, the Police National Computer Printout, because rather bizarrely they were on the, if you like, the guest list with the police should a UFO be sighted, which does occasionally still happen in this.
What do you mean, the guest list? What does that mean?
When I say guest list, I mean, say for example, if you're a police controller and you have a report of a UFO, it clearly is something that the police would not deal with, and you would either kick it into touch, do nothing with it, or you might have somebody on the list who would be able to deal with that matter. And
a non-police officer, or a
non-police officer,
right?
Yeah, a civilian organisation, for one.
All right, like Bufora or something like that.
Well, yes, you're right. But in this particular situation, it was Rob and Marilyn Aldworth.
So what you might call a palm off.
Yeah, palm off. You're right. Anyway, as I say, I spoke to them, and they came to see me, and I have to admit that prior to them coming to my house, I was labouring under the perhaps misapprehension that they had pointed ears and they looked very alien-like.
So these were UFO researchers?
Yeah, and I'm showing you how green, how stupid I was, how naive.
Green, grey.
Yeah, but these were down-to-earth people. They'd been researching for a number of years, and I told them about the story about Chris, my son, and also obviously I discussed it with Chris, and what had happened was that on the 19th of January at 6:37 p.m, the police had received a number of 999 calls from members of the public who said they'd seen red-orange objects whizzing over the city centre. As a result of a doctor, who I actually interviewed later, who living in Russell Road, Moseley, as a result of him contacting the police, he actually told them he'd seen a blue object with a dark blue head whiz over near to the police training centre. And that's how my son got involved, and he and the policewomen went and interviewed the doctor, and then went to a place called Dogpool Lane, Sturchley, where they saw this saucer-shaped object hovering over the trees. And I can always remember the policewoman telling me that she just couldn't believe what she was seeing. She kept pinching herself, and she was very distraught. And then within seconds, the thing had gone. Now, I was intrigued by this. I thought, what the heck is this? Because these things don't exist. Surely, what have they seen? So I wondered if it was a fireball of some description. So I contacted the British Astronomical Association, and I wrote to them, bearing in mind there were a number of sightings all over the country on that evening at about 6:37, 6:40 p.m. And they sent me a postcard back written by their president, a guy called Mr. Mobley. in which he said that he'd instructed his fireball coordinator. I know I know it's so funny, but
Fireball
it's
coordinator.
yeah, fireball coordinator, Mr. H.G. Miles, who I've spoken to over the years, not to get involved in crackpot organisations. So the inference there clearly was that I was somehow representative of a crackpot organisation. Now that card from the British Astronomical Association was sent. It was a postcard, and it was sent in the post. So that's the last time I had anything to do with them. But I can tell you, a few minutes past the 6:37 p.m, 6:40, there was a lady who living in Wheatley, Oxfordshire, and we went down to see her, and she saw a D-shaped object which was flying over the countryside, skipping over the hedges and over the fields. So that was
a capital D or a little D?
A capital D-shaped object.
Okay.
Yeah, really, and that meant to me nothing at the time. But the lady was an ex-retired school teacher, and the exact word she used was, there was a time I was a doubting Thomas. I would not have believed any of this existed, but now I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't any aircraft. And so that happened.
Is this on the same night?
The same night, about
Right, okay.
3 minutes later. Now
The other witnesses just saw glowing orange balls of light.
a glowing orange ball of light.
She saw a structure.
She did, yeah.
Right.
And the
Do you think it was the same object?
I don't know.
Okay.
But the frustrating part about it is that all of this was probably word processed and filed for subsequent release through a book at a future date, like 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
I mean, we, as you said yourself, we've only come up to 1977.
Yeah.
So, you know.
So what happened with your contact with this couple who were researchers? Did you keep in touch with them?
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah, they indeed. Rob and Marilyn Oldworth. Unfortunately, Marilyn committed suicide some years ago. She got very depressed and, let's say, threw herself on a railway line. And but
Really?
yeah, really. But they were a very nice couple, and
Right.
that's the sad part about life. But in fact, that couple kept some records which were handed over to a guy in Birmingham, Mr. Robert Beard. And we met Mr. Robert Beard, and he allowed us access, this is in the early days, to a lot of files about UFOs over Birmingham, and that's how we started, and we just went from one thing to another. Really.
So this became your retirement pastime then?
It did. No, it was
More
a
than a
retirement
pastime,
pastime.
really.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
we'll have a look at some of John's research files upstairs, which
well,
are...
one thing about me, and a lot of my ex-police colleagues will agree, I wasn't very good on paperwork, but I was very good at solving cases. And I'm not saying that this is a case that I'm going to solve. What I'm saying is that if you're going to do a job, you might as well do it properly. And if I found out, if you like, right from the early days, there was nothing to this, and that there were very few UFO witnesses, and that most of them were hallucinating or have had too much to drink or whatever, these books wouldn't be here. And I actually wouldn't be here talking to you, because this scenario wouldn't have existed.
And you're not the only detective who is
No.
researching and publishing information
Well, that's right.
on UFOs.
Well, of course, Gary Heseltine is, and he's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And he's a serving police CID officer.
What we're going to do, we're going to look at some selected cases from Volume 1,
Right.
which stems from, or spans, I should say, from 1940 to 1959. Then we're going to go through Volume 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, that's fine.
So there's probably going to be several programs in this series.
Right.
But at the end, or during that, we're going to discuss some of the broader implications and what possibly is really going on here.
Well,
Okay.
I will just say that one thing that we certainly, Dawn and I, have learned is behaviour characteristics of UFOs, and also, unfortunately, on some occasions, what happens to people who get too close to them. I'm not necessarily talking about abductions. I'm saying that, because I don't know whether I believe in abductions or not. All I'll say is that I believe in the people that we've interviewed over the years who've told us what has happened to them when they've got close to one of these objects. And not all people have the same stories to tell.
No. So the first case we're going to discuss from Volume 1 is a case which occurred in 1954.
A flying saucer landing in Somerset. This was Mr. Nigel Frapple, and he was walking home during the early hours of the morning when he came across this saucer-shaped object in a field, and I think it was Red Lynch Crossroads. And when he got home, he mentioned it to his brother. Somebody contacted the BBC, and then I think the expression "all hell was let loose," and all these people came to see him and interviewed him.
I'll just read this brief section.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I was astonished to see this dome-shaped object hovering approximately 40 feet off the ground in one of the nearby fields.
Yeah.
A couple of 100 yards away. It had a cockpit in the centre with 3 portholes and was glowing with violet light. Yeah. The outside of the craft consisted of what looked like glass panelling, gunmetal grey in colour. So it's your classic flying disc.
In addition to that, we discovered another witness who'd seen something a few minutes after him, but I think it's somewhere in Somerset. But let's see if we can get through to him. And
he's never agreed to be interviewed on audio.
As far as I know, no.
All I could see was a cottage on my right-hand side with an orange glow behind it. So I'm thinking, well, it's a cottage on fire, you know, the roof's on fire. Now, bear in mind, this is early hours of the morning, probably 2 o'clock in the morning. As I got near the cottage, the light had gone. So I thought, well, that's a bit funny. The fire must have gone out. So I stopped, and I looked over the gate, and I could see this object in the field with the actual glow, which I thought was a cottage on fire, was now underneath this object in the field.
Yes.
So of course, been interested in that sort of thing. I thought, oh, hang on a minute. And then the light went out. And there's a light underneath, but there's like a fluorescent blue light, a very low. There's something like you used to get in the discos later in life, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean, like a disco light.
So it wasn't moving, but it was making a sort of a humming noise, a very deep humming noise, like a submarine would be on the bottom, you know, they're trying to not disturb the ships up above. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I could see a light actually in the craft, in the portholes. And I imagine that every now and again, one of the portholes went darker as if somebody was moving around inside. Because I thought, by this time, I thought, I'd better have a closer look. And I suppose I was no more than 100 yards away from it. So I went and moved to get over the gate, and this thing started to move slightly. I thought I want to get a bit closer. As I moved, that moved.
Interesting.
And as I got a bit closer, obviously it just moved up in the air, increased the speed, turned on its side, and gone. No noise whatsoever, only like an airplane would be without an engine, you know what I mean? It's just a noise in the air. As it went over the trees down below, somebody else saw it, and they saw the underside of it. Yeah. There was another lady, a Miss Heifer, I believe, of all names. She saw it, but that was down Langport way.
But it was very similar to what you saw.
Same time. So, all in all, at least three of us saw it, but nobody else got a close look. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, you know. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't say what it was. All I did, I went to the police and said, there's an aircraft on fire or something what have in the area, so he checked all around the ministry, and they said no. Of course, by this time the newspapers got over it and what have you, to get ridiculed and all this, that and the other, but didn't change my mind. Nobody's going to change my mind, that sort of thing.
But then you had a visit, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. What the man in black saw.
Well, you had a visit by two.
Men, yeah. One was doing all the talking, the other one was doing all the looking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Then they threatened you to keep quiet.
Oh yeah, he said that insisted on being silly and putting these silly rumours about and that, you'll be taken to a place and you won't be coming home again.
That must have been frightening.
I thought, well, that's fair play. I better keep quiet.
Richplanet TV is sponsored by shopholistic.co.uk, bringing you quality detox and natural health products at affordable prices.